updates, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 2:41 on Wall Street. We check markets all day long here on Bloomberg. I'm Charlie Pettit. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all higher after Atlanta Fed President Raphael Bostic boosts sentiment. S&P up 0.5%, up 18. The Dow up 0.8%, NASDAQ up 0.4. 10-year yield 4.07% with the 2-year 4.90%. Spot gold little change, down 90 cents the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.5%, 78.09 a barrel. And that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, thanks so much, Charlie. This next story has it all for us. Celebrities, fugitives, and even the Fugees. On that last point, Pras Michel, you might remember him as a Grammy Award-winning rapper, longtime member of the Fugees. What you may not know is his role in a high-stakes negotiation between the U.S. and China, Carol.
That's for sure. It is the cover story of the new issue of Bloomberg Business Week. It is mind-blowing. But the new issue out on newsstands now, online at Bloomberg.com/businessweek on the Bloomberg terminal. So let's get to it with Bloomberg News investigations reporter Anthony Cormier. He joins us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. So I feel like, Anthony, that this story, the more it gets told, the more riveting and the more cinematic it gets. So tell us about the member of the Fugees and the connection with 1MDB.
Right. So, Pras Michel is one of the founding members of the Fugees, the 90s Grammy-winning rap act. And he met an unassuming, baby-faced Malaysian businessman in 2006 at a nightclub, and his life changed pretty dramatically after that. That Malaysian man was Jolo, the accused financier who's facing very serious charges of embezzling from a Malaysian sovereign wealth fund. And we picked this story up after, Jolo has been charged with, multiple offenses, or he's at least been accused of embezzling money. And he asks for a favor from his dear friend, Pras Michel.
So many different places to go on this one. And I feel like you got to love a story that is not only being told by us and all the esteemed business outlets out there, but it's also being told by Page Six. So let's go to it. First of all, how did these two come together, and how did Pras get so intertwined?
Right. Well, Pras Pras is a connector. He's the kind of guy who has friends in business and in politics and in entertainment, and he meets Jolo at a party, and they slowly become friends, and they begin to explore these sort of business opportunities together. And Joe found that Pras had connections to the Obama White House, and what they have been accused of is using straw donors to donate money to Obama's 2012 election campaign. Many years go by, and Joe is essentially facing a slew of charges, forfeiture complaints, and he needs some help, some representation. Turns to his dear friend Pras, and he says, listen, do you have any help? How can you connect me with a lawyer, with representation, so I can, make this thing go away? And that begins the sort of, saga of how Pras assembles a team. He goes to an old friend who connects him with a gentleman called Elliot Broidy, who is a Republican fundraiser from California, and they put together this plan where they intend to influence the new and perhaps chaotic Trump administration.
Right.
They're hoping that they can get an in there, and then things take a turn. They go and they meet with Joe, and at this meeting they're introduced to a gentleman called Sun Lijun, who is the Vice Minister of Public Security for the People's Republic of China. And they have a big question. They want to see if the Chinese can get back a critic who's living in the U.S., overlooking Central Park. And this gentleman's called Guo Wengli, and he's begun to make all of these absurd allegations about the PRC. And the Chinese want him back, and they say to Pras and his group of friends, can you get him back? And, that leads again to this very unusual set of circumstances.
Well, then what does Pras do after that?
But, there's a number of things that happen in between there. But one night Pras is sleeping, and the Chinese, including Sun Lijun, they're in the United States. They're trying to meet with top members of the White House or the administration, and they can't get anywhere. The meeting doesn't happen, and so they phone Praz basically and say, get to the Four Seasons on 57th,
Oh my
going right
God.
across from our building. Get here now. And he arrives. There's this very cloak and dagger scene where he's told to exit the hotel and circle it twice to make sure I'm not being tailed. And his phone's going in a bag, and he's alone in a room with 2 chairs. He doesn't have any idea what's going on, and he's basically like, oh my gosh, they can't kill me in the Four Seasons.
So let's bring in the editor of Business Week, Joel Weber. Joel, I mean, I feel like we could just listen to Anthony go on and on about this.
And we will, because who cares about me right now?
No, we do.
The quote that you hit in the story was, "They can't kill me in the Four Seasons."
Give me a T-shirt with that on it
yeah,
right
exactly.
now.
Yeah, when you get there,
Netflix
you're like,
series.
oh
Yes.
yeah, I'll go ahead and keep reading. And the story, there's so many dimensions of this story, and it just keeps you going until the end, and then you're like, wow, I can't wait to watch the movie about this. But so the next turn in this story is basically going to be when Praz goes to trial, right? So what are the charges against him that the U.S. is bringing?
Praz goes to Washington.
He faces campaign finance allegations. He faces violating what's called the Foreign Agents Registration Act, essentially acting on behalf of a foreign government. He faces some very, very serious offenses, and many of the people who were also charged in this case, they've already, for lack of a better word, they flipped. They're cooperating with the U.S. government now against Praz. But Praz thinks, he says he's innocent. He says, I'm not going to accept a plea to a charge I didn't commit. He plans to fight it. And, as far as we can tell, he's going to launch a pretty vigorous defense.
You know, I have to say, we've been looking forward to talking to you, and Joel has been kind of teeing us up and just giving us little nuggets. Because part of this coverage, there's your great story, the three of you, this reporting, but there's also this incredible sidebar that talks about, I said page 6, right? This is a story that we've reported on, all the financial journalists, but also page 6 because of Leonardo DiCaprio.
And Kim Kardashian. So tell us about that part.
So, as the FBI agents are pursuing Jolo, they want to find out where his money went, what he was up to, and they knew that he partied all of the time with all kinds of A-list celebrities. Leonardo DiCaprio, Las Vegas with Kim Kardashian, the record producer Swizz Beatz. He gave them extraordinary gifts. He had financed the Wolf of Wall Street for Leonardo DiCaprio.
Right.
And so they begin to squeeze these celebrities, and you really rarely get a look at the way the FBI treats A-list celebrities, and these documents, our reporting, shows how serious they took these cases, and they brought, in fact, Leo, in his case, they sat him down for this long and sort of invasive interview. They brought him back before a grand jury. They went through his emails, his BlackBerry messages.
I mean, Dog got grilled?
Yeah, dear L Dog. He did. He had quite a lot that he did remember, and then if you read the report from the FBI, there's quite a lot of documents he didn't remember either. And he had a pretty long and extensive history with Joe. And while we know the parties, I think that's been pretty widely reported. What no one has known is how close they became. Their relationship went beyond this sort of, you'll finance my film and you'll come to my yacht, to let's build $1 billion movie fund. Let's build an eco resort on an island. Let's get money for this or for that. And you've got Leo connecting Joe with all of his, his buddies. I mean, their relationship was much closer, I think, than the public has known to this point.
Okay, wait. Kardashian.
Kim,
Okay.
yes.
So plays some poker, does pretty well.
She plays Baccarat, actually.
Does pretty well.
Yes, she does very well.
How well does she do, and what happens with the money?
She does so well that she's up $350,000 in chips one night, and her security guard, in fact, says, "You got it. Those aren't your chips. You can't take them home." She's okay. I'll give them back to Jolo. Jolo says, "No, they're for you." She doesn't know what to do with this many chips. She walks to the casino counter. They literally give her a bag of $250,000 in $100 bills. They put it in a garbage bag.
That's my favorite part.
She puts it in her carry-on luggage and gets on a Southwest flight back to LA.
Wait,
which is
Southwest? I love you, Southwest, but
There you go.
That was, I think, too
Where
many.
was the private
That's
jet?
your
Too many of
moment
our-
of sin right there.
It's beautiful.
You can't make
Such
it
a
up.
good
It is
story.
perfection.
You're welcome.
All the teeing up was right on the money. Anthony, thank you so much.
for having
Well
me.
done, the whole team. Your investigation. Anthony Cormier, investigations reporter at Bloomberg News. Joel Weber, the editor of Business Week. This is the cover story. It's a must read. You're going to have fun this weekend checking it out. This is Bloomberg.
Your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. 2:53 on Wall Street. Citigroup is cutting hundreds of jobs across the company, with the Wall Street Giants investment banking division among those affected. Now, sources say the cuts amount to less than 1% of Citigroup's 240,000-person workforce. Staffers across the firm's operations and technology organization and U.S. mortgage underwriting arm are also among those affected. Citigroup shares now down by about 0.8%. Tesla's much-awaited Investor Day failed to live up to the hype. The shares of the electric vehicle maker paying the price. Tesla down now by 6.5%. Dan Ives is with Wedbush Securities. He's got a $225 price target on the stock, along with an outperform rating.
They laid the groundwork for what I view as a flex the muscles type of event from a scale and scope in terms of what they're doing on EVs. But you didn't have a sub-30K vehicle introduced. I think that's still to come. But I think they laid the groundwork for it. Stock will sell off knee-jerk, and now it becomes a sort of what's the next step on this roadmap.
And right now we do have Tesla shares down 6.7%. Macy's soaring after the retailer reported fourth quarter earnings that exceeded expectations, thanks in part to sales growth at the Bloomingdale's and Bluemercury brands. Macy's shares are rallying now by 10.6%. Salesforce.com after earnings up 12.2%. And those are the company stories we're following this hour. I'm Charlie Pellett. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
You are listening and watching Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master, Matty Mills in for Tim on this Thursday. Bloomberg Business Week brought to you by Innovation Refunds. This is your daily reminder from Innovation Refunds. If your business was hurt by COVID, it may qualify for a payroll tax refund. Even if you took PPP, your business, getrefunds.com.
And as you just heard, Macy's shares are soaring after the retailer reported fourth quarter earnings that exceeded expectations. That was thanks in part to sales growth at the Bloomingdale's and Bluemercury brands. As far as how the consumers are doing, here's Macy's chairman and CEO, Jeanette. Sorry, guys, I lost my script for a second earlier on Bloomberg Television.
When you look at across our portfolio of three brands, you're going to have modest ticket price increases in 23 versus more aggressive ones in 22. So that's starting to abate a little bit. And so I think this consumer they've got lots of choices. And so I think one of the things that is I'm looking to see where our competitors are with their inventory is we've controlled our inventory well. And I think when you get the environment that is at status with demand, everybody benefits from that. What I'm very proud of is the fact that when you look at our inventory situation, we have the opportunity to chase consumer demand. And we're doing that with slightly higher ticket increases. We're using our pricing science. We're going after demand, be it in casual or be it in career, be it in travel, and to really respond to where the customer is going. And we're doing a good job of doing that in real time. So that we're looking at having open to buy reserves. So each of the merchants basically have the ability to respond to customer demand, and they're chasing after that demand and using our pricing science to get the most out of those transactions.
All right, that is the Macy's chairman and CEO, Jeff Gannett, earlier on Bloomberg TV. Really love to hear what the retailers have to say. And it's interesting, you've got Macy's shares up, I think roughly 10.4%. They were up almost 14% at their highs, but gives us ideas of, you know, what the consumer is doing, what the outlook is. These are really important facets as we try to figure our way forward, especially when, you know, we're all constantly having these conversations, recession, no recession, soft landing.
Yeah.
How are the higher rate environments impacting us all?
Yeah, and just also really interesting that, you know, they are going to have those higher prices on some items, but we're still seeing such consumer resilience. I'm teasing a little bit ahead to what I'm going to talk about with our colleagues on the simulcast, but consumer spending is higher now than it was pre-pandemic.
Which is kind of interesting.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, and is it just because of higher costs? Is it bulk? Is it volume?
I think it's both, right? That's always my question. Like, is it higher just because everything is more expensive? But it's both. They're spending more money on more things.
We're going to talk a little bit about the trade because right now, guys, we are looking at an equity trade that is off its lows. In fact, we are just off our highs of the session. And this has to do with some comments by the Federal Reserve Bank of President, Atlanta President, I should say, Raphael Bostic, who talked about, you know, how he is open specifically to seeking a higher rate peak if the data stays hot, which we continue to see, certainly when it comes to the labor market, but also consumer spending and other numbers. But he also talked about maybe a pause by mid to late summer. This is, I know, something that's going to come up certainly on our conversation. But right now, you've got the S&P up about 0.5%. You've got the Dow up almost 0.9%. The NASDAQ a gain of 0.4%. And that yield curve, taking a look, we're still seeing 4.9 on that 2-year. That 10-year note still staying above, though, 4% as well. So lots for us to certainly tackle when it comes to the conversations of the markets. We're going to continue to unpack over the next couple of hours. Right now, though, we are going to head over to our TV colleagues, see what they have to say, what's on their radar. I'm watching the bank stocks, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And you're watching, you said retail, right?
Oh, I'm watching retail, always. Love retail. Love retail.
It's a good sector to watch. All right, let's head over to our TV colleagues. We're going to talk about the markets because countdown to the close. It starts right now.
the close. Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage ahead of the U.S. market close starts right now.
This is the countdown to the close. 60 minutes left to go here on this trading session on a Thursday afternoon. Romaine Bostic alongside Scarlett Fu. We'll bring in our colleagues Carol Masser and Madison Mills, and welcome our audiences across our Bloomberg platforms on TV, radio, Bloomberg Originals, and for those folks streaming on YouTube. Carol Masser, this has been an interesting day in the equity markets. We started out in the red. A lot of people looking at that uptick in yields to 4% across the board. Then about midday, I guess some people decided enough was enough, and we got green across the screen. I'm not sure if this is directly tied to what the Fed is going to do, or maybe just people are just sick and tired of being sick and tired.
I think they're sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make sense of it because, right, those yields, you know, we've got the whole yield curve above 4%, which made me want to look at the bank stocks. So I'm like, all right, how is the bank sector seeing it? Is it good, higher rates they can charge when it comes to lending out money specifically, and so they make more money as a result? Or at the same time, that higher rate environment, does it worry investors about the Fed doing too much ultimately and slowing down the economy and pushing it into a recession? So what's going on? If you look at the KBW Bank Index, you're seeing underperformance. It's down more than 2% as a whole. Take a look at some of the individual names. JP Morgan Chase, it's down about 1%. Morgan Stanley down just about 0.25%. And then you've got Goldman Sachs, it's up about 2/3% here, funnily enough, if you will. But you got to keep in mind, it took a hit earlier in the week during that investor day. So maybe that's why we're seeing a little bit of an upswing. But nonetheless, the whole sector is down.
The whole sector is down, and it's really interesting. You're looking at banks. I'm looking at consumers today. Jobless claims coming in lower, but this comes as spending is still so high. I'm so interested in this chart from Mike McKee. It shows that consumer spending is higher now than it was at pre-pandemic levels. And we always talk about those stimulus checks, but it's been 2 years, and people are still spending. So those expectations for consumer spending, just you have to factor this into that, Romaine.
Yeah, you certainly do. Just a quick check. I want to go back to the broader market here in S&P at 39.76 and change right now. That's pretty much the highs of the day. Similar story for the rest of the indices. 0.6% on the S&P, call it 1% on the Dow. And once again, I think it's interesting, not on the board there, but Dow Transports continue to be out front. And I think it's interesting that every time we have these rallies, at least over the last 5 to 8 weeks or so, it's always been transports out front. They're up 1.8% right now.
That's interesting.
They've had an incredible run this year, and they just continue to move on. In looking at the sector performance, I go back to what you were saying, Carol, with financials, the weak link here, off by 0.75%. Silvergate might be a factor as to why the banking sector is kind of weak today. There's no real evidence of any kind of contagion, but it certainly kind of puts a damper in terms of sentiment on the sector overall, even though they should benefit when interest rates rise. On the flip side, you have utilities among the best performers, and of course they had lost big time earlier this week, so it's a bit of a bounce back.
Yeah, you take a look at some of those individual movers. Silvergate down more than 50% here on the day. Certainly a story unique to itself. I was keeping an eye on Credit Suisse here. That's not a typo there. $2.81 right now on the ADRs on Credit Suisse, down 6% here on the day. That bank, another one to keep an eye on. Of course, Credit Suisse, Silvergate, two completely different stories, but two financial companies that had a great deal of importance for particularly different reasons. Go to the top of the screen there. You got Kroger shares up about 5%. The earnings came out. Same-store sales were good. Margins were relatively stable. Investors seem to like what they've seen. And Salesforce, of course, the biggest percent gainer and points contributor to the S&P today, up 12% on the back of relatively good earnings, and more importantly, a little bit of constraint when it comes to those costs. Flip it up here. I want to take a look now that earnings season is winding down here, and you have a big part of the reason why this market remains range-bound and to a certain extent to the downside, and that goes back to inflation-adjusted earnings, and basically your real earnings yield. It has been negative now basically since the mid to late 2021, and while it has been trying to get back into the green, it is not there yet. So remember, anytime you see these beats, anytime you see these companies reporting better earnings on an inflation-adjusted basis, you're still losing. So until inflation gets under control, that could be a big constraint here for any additional gains in the broader market.
What a telling chart. And for those who are listening on radio, I mean, this whole idea that, right, it's not looking good in terms of those inflation-adjusted earnings, which makes me think about a little bit about the outlook, and then what does that mean for earnings going forward, especially in an environment where we've got the memo. I keep saying it, more rate hikes, and we got another one of the Fed.
Does the Fed actually send you the memos directly?
I got an in. What can I tell you? on that more rate hike chant, we heard from Susan Collins. She's president of the Boston Fed. She was in a Vermont public radio interview yesterday. They released it today. Here's what she had to say. I do believe that we will need to do some additional rate increases, and exactly what the right amount is really needs to be dependent on a holistic review of the information that we receive. And then I do believe that it will be important to hold there for some time because it takes a while for the effects of tighter financial conditions to work through the economy. So one, they're data dependent. We got that, right? And basically that lag effect. And then, put on top of that, the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston President Raphael Bostic also talking about the higher rate peak, but he also said that the Fed could be in a position to pause by mid to late summer. So kind of interesting, and that's why we saw maybe essentially the
Fed
uptick.
President.
Atlantic, excuse me.
And I thought it was interesting that these I felt like, was it yesterday or the day before, we were just talking about that statement he put out, which seemed a lot more hawkish than what he said today.
Yeah, I don't get it.
I don't understand why the market
always points out he doesn't even vote, so why are we?
Exactly.
Yeah, but some of these guys are involved in the conversation, the narrative.
But then why?
And adding to the noise.
I mean, it's so, if you go to our MLive blog, we've got a great comment on this. It's literally just saying Fed Bostic's comments are not dovish at all. It's far from it.
That's what Mike McKee said, right?
He's then Creedy's like, the markets are seeing this is dovish.
He's giving the Bostics a bad name. What's going on with Scarlett's shot here?
Well, you know what?
Did your chair go
Oh,
down?
my gosh, no.
Scar.
There we go. Thank you. Now I feel like
I like the idea that our chair went down.
Yeah, I know.
I want to focus on jobless claims because even though this is a high-frequency number and we get it every week, the fact that it came in better than expected in that it unexpectedly fell indicates that the labor market still remains very resilient. But Eliza Winger of Bloomberg Economics was saying that companies are hoarding labor, which may indicate that the labor market strength is being exaggerated. So she would recommend that people look at profit margins, to see how long companies can hoard.
Well, one thing we haven't talked about on the television program is the data that we got today. Of course, we got the weekly jobs claims number, but I thought those labor cost numbers, Scarlett, were really telling here, and maybe a big part of the conundrum.
They rose twice as much as expected.
Yeah, and it's backward looking. It was fourth quarter numbers, but still, that trend is still high. And it wasn't not just Trump, but you talk about over the long-term average. I mean, our long-term average is something like 1.7, 1.8. That coming in at, what was it, 3.2 or something?
You know, it all feeds this idea that we're getting this second wave of inflation.
Yeah. It's happening again.
You talk about inflation adjusted, nothing
4%
looks good when you adjust for inflation right now.
That's the tattoo for today, or the T-shirt. We're going to come back in less than an hour's time. We've got some earnings, which really help us in trying to figure out what's going forward. We're going to be breaking down some earnings. Are you saying something?
No, I think we have to go.
Keep going, Carol. Keep going.
I'm trying. All right, we'll be back in less than an hour's time. Beyond the Bell, our cross-platform coverage. Remain, if he is good, he'll come back at 4 p.m. Wall Street time. We'll see you then. Richest man, he just reclaimed that title, and his world, including his marquee company, Tesla, which yesterday in Austin hosted its investor day. Kind of a dud and bummer if you base it on how shares of Tesla are trading down today, looking to shave some $50 billion off its market cap. Not a dud, though, Elon's comments when it comes to rare earths. Listen up.
We need to make just a very giant amount of anode, cathode, lithium hydroxide, lithium carbonate. It's really the refining capacity that is the biggest choke point. So that's why we're building a lithium refinery in Corpus Christi.
All right, you were just hearing from Elon Musk at his investor day in Austin yesterday. Actually, I'm sorry, our next guest is with us in Austin. We've got Bloomberg's Sean O'Kane. He was at Tesla's investor day. He's our EV reporter joining us from Zoom in Austin, Texas. Sean, great to speak with you. Tell us your impressions. How'd the meeting go?
Well, first, actually, I was watching just like everybody else online. There's no way Tesla's letting us in to something like that, unfortunately, these days. But yeah, it was meandering. I think one of the things that we appreciated from the reporting side of things, and I think even some of the analysts appreciated as well, was just seeing a very deep roster of Tesla executives and managers and employees who were on stage speaking and also taking questions at the end. We got some FaceTime with Tom Zhu, who is essentially, arguably, the number 2 at Tesla right now, who was, Musk brought him over late last year from helping run Tesla China to be able to sort of straighten out some of the early problems they've had at the factory here in Austin. So seeing all of that was really helpful, and hearing some new details about some of the things that they're working on was also exciting to some of the faithful. But yeah, we didn't get as much explicit information about new products that I think some people were expecting heading into the event, which is why I think we're seeing a little bit of a dip in the price today.
Was there anything that he didn't say? What was missing that you felt was critical that he left out?
I mean, the big thing is really this next gen vehicle platform. Yeah. I mean, it was something that he explicitly teased would be discussed on the most recent earnings call. And we got bits and pieces about their strategy, how they're approaching maybe building it. We learned that primarily it will be built at the new factory in Mexico that was announced earlier this week by AMLO and confirmed by Musk last night, all the way in the back end of the event during the Q&A session. So we learned a little bit about it. We understand sort of how they're thinking about making it more efficiently, making it so that more employees can work on it at a time versus their cars now. But we didn't see what it looks like. We didn't really get a price tag or a price range. And they have talked about being able to use that new platform to power different types of vehicles, but they were a little fuzzy on what those types of vehicles would be. And there's also not a lot of headroom for that to begin with, because Musk said last night that he doesn't think they're going to ever make more than 10 different vehicles at all. And they already have about 7 either on the road or in the pipeline that we know of. So that was, I think, the biggest thing that a lot of people were looking for and didn't really get.
I don't even know where to begin or think about it. I mean, it's kind of wild. I feel like it's pure Elon. But, the thing what he said about the rare earth minerals, that's a big deal, Sean, because there is a huge narrative, huge reporting space at Bloomberg and other, watching this amid the kind of China-U.S. tensions and, the world competing for all of these minerals. I mean, is he upending EVs and batteries?
I mean, I think there's a lane for that for sure.
Okay.
I think his hesitance to get into mining full bore, pun not intended, probably means that that's not necessarily what's going to happen in the near term. I mean, he once again stressed this call of getting any other entrepreneurs, out in the world involved in this sort of process. And, he thinks that, even though Tesla's obviously now working on its own lithium refinery here in Texas, he thinks that that's not going to be enough. There needs to be a lot more people doing that kind of material refining of the raw material, which is in abundance and really, sort of at the moment and in the near term doesn't really look like the supply of that is going to be a constraint. So he really thinks that refining it is going to be the constraint, which we heard in the quote. And so, if they were really reaching their hands down deep all the way to the bottom of the supply chain and being the ones that themselves were pulling the materials out of the ground, maybe that would be a little bit different. We know that's something they've entertained. Just a couple of weeks ago, we reported that they have been considering buying Sigma Lithium, which is a miner here in North America. They've had talks with Glencore in the past. I think that was reported last year or the year before. So it's something that's on their mind and something he's talked about on earnings calls. But it's not quite as full bore as it might seem. Though it was interesting to hear them confirm that they actually broke ground on the site in Corpus Christi for this refinery, because up until, literally yesterday, I had local officials down there telling me they haven't heard a peep from them in the last couple of months, and they were unsure what was actually going on.
All right, Sean, I'm going to do a little rapid fire with you, and then we can kind of build some stuff out, because I feel like with Elon, there's always so many different moving parts. Okay, so Roadster, just quickly, did we get anything?
No, we didn't really hear anything about that, so not really sure what the status of that is at the moment.
What about the truck?
Which one? The Cybertruck or the semi-truck? Cybertruck, they are continuing apace at trying to get the first few units built here in Texas later this year, but not until next year will we see any sort of real volume production. So, that's about all we got updated on last night.
Twitter, the company, the distraction, succession, someone to run Twitter while Elon does other stuff. Anything?
Surprisingly little about Twitter last night, because Musk does love a tangent. Although I do think that, succession was maybe winked at a little bit by having Tom Zhu speak and having all these other people up there. If not to say, here's who's going to take over the company if I decide to leave, like I've teased in the past, but to say, look at this wealth of people that we have working, these bright minds that we have working on this company, running this company, so that, if I do go off and get distracted by something else and buy some other company that takes up all my time and money, the company's in good hands.
All right, one more, and then Maddie, it's yours.
Oh, no.
AI. Because my understanding is that, I forget, there was a column or something I read, and it was like, wait, don't worry, Elon's kind of done with Twitter. The shiny new thing is now AI, and he's got his own little group working on it. Did any of that come up?
Not specifically about that report, but Tesla is working very hard and spending a lot of resources on developing artificial intelligence, in the sense that they're using neural networks to train their software that handles all their driver assistance features. Also in the Tesla robot, which we got a glimpse of again yesterday, still not a lot of detail about that. So they are moving forward pretty fast on some of those. Some of that, but it was honestly a little bit less of a feature of last night's presentation than I expected to hear.
I was really excited, I'm so sorry, by the potential cost reduction on cars. I think 50%, targeting a 50% cost reduction. Can you talk a little bit about the impetus for that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the funny things about it, and maybe this is factoring into the market reaction, is that last night's event was less about flash and promises and more about fundamentals. And when's the last time that we've heard, an event from Tesla be more about fundamentals than
right.
big promises and big ideas? The goal with this next generation vehicle platform, based on all the learnings that Tesla's done over, popularizing the Model Y and building it out at huge volumes, at least for them, is going to be able to let them get 50% cost reduction up front, as far as what it's going to cost them to build that vehicle, which is why people are so excited about it, because it means that they could substantially lower the price of whatever vehicle they build or vehicles they build out of it. And they spent a lot of time talking about how they reached some of those cost reductions, how they've reduced their footprint and become more efficient. The story from the beginning, since Musk got involved with Tesla 15 plus years ago, has been vertical integration. And so this was really a celebration of that strategy paying off for them, one that, has sort of other companies and other startups in this space have tried to replicate,
right.
But, are finding out how difficult it is. Rivian's the most recent example, reporting sort of lackluster earnings earlier this week and burning tons of cash still trying to do the same kinds of things.
Yeah. Sean, really, really quickly, Ross Gerber.
He was there. Yes, he's sort of thrown up his hands and surrendered his board bid, but he was there. He seems to be one of the ones who was most happy about the presentation and the things that Tesla discussed. And we'll see where he goes from here. I don't know what kind of role he's going to be playing going forward, but he's certainly trying to remain one of the louder voices on the sidelines cheering this company on.
Well, he's going to join us actually tomorrow too, so maybe we'll pick your brain, see what you're interested in from Ross Gerber, and see how happy he is post that meeting and changes perhaps, and not looking for that board seat anymore. Sean O'Kane, you're incredible, EV reporter at Bloomberg News via Zoom in Austin.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 3:21 on Wall Street. Bostic speaks, stocks rally. Let's head right over to the first word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
Good afternoon, Charlie. That's right. U.S. stocks with a late day bid as Fed's Bostic said the Fed could be in the position to pause by mid to late summer. Dow's up 300 points now. S&P's gained 22, and NASDAQ rises by 57. The U.S. 10-year yield at 4.07%. Gold is little change. Energy is in the green, and Bitcoin is lower by 0.4%. Of the main 11 S&P sectors, only financials and consumer discretionary were in the red, and leaders to the upside in the Dow: Salesforce, Intel, and McDonald's, while J.P. Morgan fell 1% and led to the downside. After earnings, Snowflake fell 12%, and in deal news, the TD CEO says fully committed to the First Horizon deal. In other news, Blinken said the U.S. may sanction China if it gives Russia military aid. And wrapping things up, some of the names reporting after the bell tonight include Costco, Broadcom, C3 AI, and Dell. Live from the first breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
All right, Bill Maloney, he's got us covered, and to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type Squawk, SQUA, on your Bloomberg terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Well, Bloomberg Business Week, we are brought to you by Innovation Refunds. This is your daily reminder from Innovation Refunds. Your small to medium-sized business could be missing out on an opportunity to claim the Employee Retention Credit. Innovation Refunds has helped thousands of small and medium-sized businesses claim over $3 billion in ERC refunds and may be able to help yours as well. Learn more at getrefunds.com. We got to get to our next story. It's a most read story on the Bloomberg.
And I understand why, because, I mean, Carol, if you could take a private jet anywhere all the time, would you do it?
Yes. Yes, you had me at hello.
Yes, right. Like, I don't care if it's 1 minute. I would do it. I would do it all the time. And that's exactly what Elon Musk is doing. We were just talking about him. He's got Tesla. He's got Twitter. He's got the challenges of being the richest man in the world. That busy schedule requires a lot of private jet time. So here with more on this wild story. It's very interactive, so you really should check it out online on the Bloomberg terminal. We've got Bloomberg News Wealth Team reporter Sophie Alexander. She's one of the 3 writers on this story. Sophie, thank you so much for chatting with us about this. Did this story come about because of the college kid who was tweeting about Elon's flights, or did it come about with something else?
Yeah, I mean, this is one that we've been wanting to do for a while just because of the attention that Elon's flights have gotten. And I got to say that, Jack Sweeney's work and his Twitter accounts definitely brought more attention to it. And, I think also just the fact that Elon was so bothered by it, it made us think, okay, well, maybe let's take a deeper look here.
You just want to poke the bear, right? Is that what's going on, Sophie?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's just curious. And, Jack's done a great job of cataloging where this jet has been going. And I think we just wanted to take a step back and look at what that actually means over the course of a year.
Did you talk to him for the story at all? Or were you really just like, yeah, we're doing our own reporting, but thanks for the idea?
So, yeah, we've talked to Jack before. I mean, he's been doing this as a sort of side project while he's in college, but our data team scraped our data from ADSB Exchange, which is where Jack also gets his data. Yeah.
You know what's interesting? Sophie, we talked so much, and we just talked with our own Sean O'Kane about the investor meeting at Tesla yesterday. Elon is someone who has a lot on his plate and seems to, excel by having a lot, whether it's solar, whether it's the Boring Company, whether it's AI, whether it's Tesla, whether it's, rockets and, SpaceX. Having said that, the ability to have a private jet and bop around the world and have that at your beck and call kind of makes it possible. And so tell us what you guys learned in putting this together and what he's been doing.
Yeah, and I should add that this is just Elon's personal jet. This isn't the SpaceX jet or the Tesla jet that's used by the companies. But yeah, I mean, this man is moving around a lot, and I think something that's been really interesting to see in the data is just like how much more he's flying after he's acquiring Twitter, especially, of course, to the Bay Area. that really shot up after that. And it really just all shows the toll it takes to run 5 companies.
I'll tell you what it takes. It takes Musk's jet flying around the Earth 12.4 times last year.
I was just going to say, it's like pick your data point. And again, you really need to experience this story on the terminal because, Sophie, you guys did just such a cool job visualizing this. Sophie, what's your favorite data point here about the flights that this man is taking?
I think it's kind of fun. This is less of a data point, but I think it's kind of fun to see where he's going, and you can sort of map along. You know, we don't know when he's in the jet or not, but because he tweets so much, we sort of do. You know, like, so we have this great globe graphic. So you can see, you know, in January, he's in Hawaii on Larry Ellison's island. Then he's in April. In April, he's in Berlin, and then later he's in Vancouver for a TED event, and then he's in Sao Paulo, and then in Rome, and then later in the year he's at the World Cup. So, yeah, I think that was the most fun to see.
That's the other thing that's so cool, that you have the tweets embedded in the story next to the locations.
Well, it's just a reminder, right, of the amount of data. I mean, someone who knows so much about data and the usage of it, but you think about all the information that's out there that enables you guys to, I would say, fairly easily have the data to put something like this together.
That's right. Elon Musk doesn't engage with reporters all that much, but we all know that he does engage with Twitter a lot.
Yeah, I love, too, that you compare him to the other billionaires flying private jets. Musk comes in at the top with 171 flights. Zuck's got 115, Page at 85, and Ellison at 82. I think that's really cool that you mapped all of that out. But of course, the carbon footprint here is a really big deal. Can you talk a little bit about the impact that his flights are causing?
Sure. Yeah, that's 2,112 metric tons of greenhouse gas roughly emitted in 2022 from, you know, that personal jet alone. And so, you know, when you hear, you know, the vague statistic or the vague fact that rich people or the 1% are the biggest emitters of these greenhouse gases compared to regular folks, you know, this is a good example of that. You know, that is 140 times more than the average American's carbon footprint. And, you know, we decided to compare it to Tesla's because, of course, you know, Musk. And so to make that up, a Tesla Model 3 would have to replace an average premium just combustion car for 7 million miles to make that up.
There's some perspective for you. Hey, the title on the story is Elon Musk is so busy his private jet is taking 13-minute flights. So what is that 13-minute flight?
That's a good question. We're not totally sure what's going on there, but there are a handful of these 15-minute flights, you know, that are just like either circling or going from like Hawthorne to Long Beach, which was like, you know, 15 minutes away. And it is just like interesting to go through all this data. You're seeing all different sorts of weird stuff like that, like, you know, a trip from Northern California and then circling around Las Vegas and then just going back to California. So as if he was just like going up to see the lights. But these are the kinds of things that we're not going to have that much insight into as to like why those things are happening.
I think I remember our Twitter friend, the college student, tweeting this out when it was happening, and a lot of the response was that maybe it was like a fueling thing, or it had to do with the staffing on the airplanes. I know you just explained very well that we're not going to know the reason, but does that seem plausible to you at all? Did that come up at all in your reporting?
Yeah, totally possible that these could just be routine checks. There was also a period during the year where the plane was grounded for a while, and again, Sweeney speculated that that was probably for some routine maintenance. But yeah, it's possible that it's all routine. It's possible that he's also just going up for a joyride.
Sophie, you know, you are a Wealth Team reporter, and Elon Musk recently getting back the title of the world's richest person. And I do think about, you know, we track so much when it comes to Elon and Tesla. I think about how we used to track, you know, when he would say some things and then when they came true. I mean, it's just, we're obsessed with him. What is it that you think for someone who, like yourself, you know, tracks the world's rich people, what is it about Elon in particular that we are just all so fascinated with?
I mean, he is. He makes himself such a public figure by nature of his tweeting and by his activities. He's a total goofball in a lot of ways, and I think there's a total cult of personality there. There's a lot of Musk supporters, of course, on Twitter who will come to defend him at an instant. I think a lot of it has to do with the products that he's producing with Tesla and SpaceX. But it's also just like a remarkable thing for one individual to say, you know what, I'm going to buy this social media company and then actually follow through on it. I mean, we live in a capitalist society. Money is power, and this man has a lot of money.
Sophie, really quickly, we've got 30 seconds left. What do you think is the biggest risk factor for Elon Musk potentially dropping off that high spot of his on the rich list?
I mean, I think everyone's watching this Investor Day. It's all about Tesla for Elon and for his wealth.
Yeah, and so far, you know, what are we talking about? $50 billion being shaved off the market cap of Tesla because a little bit of a dud coming off that investor meeting yesterday. Hey, Sophie, thank you so much. Sophie Alexander, Wealth Team reporter at Bloomberg News, joining us on the phone in New York City. As Maddie said, this is a story to really be experienced online or on the Bloomberg because it's interactive, you play around with it, and there's lots of fun and interesting data points. And I'm sure Elon is just loving it that we're like obsessed with his flights.
I mean, she said it so well. He got upset about people talking about his flights, and that gave us a clue about what we should cover.
And to be fair, like security issues, because right now I think there's a lag in terms of the information.
Well said, Carol, yes.
All right, let's get back to world and national news. For that, it's off to Nancy Lyons in our 99.1 newsroom in the nation's capital. Hey, Nance.
Thanks, Carol. The Justice Department says former President Trump can be sued by injured Capitol Police officers and Democratic lawmakers over the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. The department's position was laid out in a filing before a federal appeals court. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is confirming he did speak with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on the sidelines of the G20 in India today. He says he confronted him on nuclear weapons.
I spoke briefly with Russia's Foreign Minister Lavrov on the margins of our G20 meeting today. I urged Russia to reverse its irresponsible decision and return to implementing the New START Treaty, which places verifiable limits on the nuclear arsenals of the United States and the Russian Federation.
Secretary Blinken says he also urged Russia to release detained American Paul Whelan. Jurors will soon begin their deliberations into the double murder trial of disgraced South Carolina attorney Alec Murdaugh. Defense attorney Jim Griffin and prosecutor John Metters have posed two very different views about why Murdaugh lied about being at the scene of the crime just minutes before his wife and son were murdered.
He lied because that's what addicts do. Addicts lie. He lied because he had a closet full of skeletons.
Can you imagine not telling law enforcement, lying that I was down there and I saw him? I was right there. Why wouldn't you tell them that?
The jury has heard testimony from more than 70 witnesses over the past 6 weeks. Recent rains and blizzards have apparently made a dent in California's drought. 3 months ago, virtually the entire state was experiencing drought conditions. Now about 49% of the state is in a moderate or severe drought. But in drought data released today, authorities warn low groundwater levels remain a persistent problem that could take months to recover. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 3:41 on Wall Street. I'm Charlie Pellet. A rally into the close here with the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ at or near session highs, right to the numbers. And we begin with the 10-year, 4.06%. We have got the 2-year yielding 4.88%. S&P 500 index now up by 36 points. That is a gain of 0.9%. The Dow, the outperformer, up 1.2%, higher by 393 points on the Dow. The NASDAQ Composite Index up 0.9%, while the NASDAQ 100 Index is up now by just about 1%. Again, the 10-year worth repeating, 4.07%. We have got spot gold up 20 cents the ounce to $18.36. A little change there, while West Texas Intermediate crude oil is up 0.4%, 78 even a barrel on WTI. So it is an up day for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. Lots of names scheduled to report earnings after the close of trading today. We'll be all over those names as they break. VMware among some of the stocks. Broadcom, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Zscaler, and Dell Technologies. Those among some of the tech stocks we'll be on the lookout for. Also reporting after the bell, Nordstrom, Victoria's Secret, and Costco Wholesale. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home? Honey, please, I'll do the driving. Drive on. Excuse me, I want to drive. It's
the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, got just about 18 minutes left in today's trading session, getting ready to wrap up the Thursday trade. We've got equities, folks, as you just heard from Charlie. We're pretty much at our highs of the session. Dow really outperforming. NASDAQ, though, up just like the S&P, about 0.9%. And this is despite the yield curve, as we talked about earlier. All along the yield curve, treasuries we're seeing back above 4%. So that's pretty interesting. But it has to do with Atlanta President Raphael Bostic saying the central bank could be in a position to pause rate hikes sometimes this summer. Is that a pivot? I don't know, but it's something to consider.
It is absolutely something to consider that we are definitely going to get into with our next guest. It's time for the Drive to the Close. Back with us, JJ Kinahan, CEO at IG North America, on Zoom with us from Chicago. JJ, thanks so much for being here to chat with us. We're going to talk about a lot with you, JJ, but I do want to just kick it off with that news that Carol was just talking about, Bostic today. Markets like it? Is it dovish? What's your take?
The markets do like it, but the markets have been a bit like a spoiled child, if you're going to be honest.
It's fair.
And what I mean by that is I don't think that in general, Chairman Powell has actually wavered much from the fact that he's going to keep raising rates until he feels that we're in a good place. And the market, every time there's some hint that we won't raise at the same pace or we'll slow down a little bit, starts to rally, people get excited, and then, it seems like a few weeks later, we raise rates or he says what he's going to do again, and it's almost like you keep testing him, and, he's saying you're going to get punished, so we don't believe him and continue to try. But at the end of the day, I think what this does give people hope for is either a pause or maybe you go to quarter point from half point, so the pace starts to slow down. And that does get the market a little bit excited. But overall, as I said, the market just hasn't really wanted to pay attention, and I don't think Chairman Powell's wavered a whole lot over the last year and a half.
Yeah, dollar index clinging onto gains. No surprises. Yields have moved up, JJ, and we're still holding among that 4% level when it comes to Treasury yields across the curve. So having said that, things are getting more expensive. We talk about it with corporate real estate. We talk about it with the housing market. We talk about so many different things, and yet you see that enthusiasm in the equity markets. You see a lot on your platform. What are you seeing when it comes to trades and trends? How are investors largely trading?
So it's been really interesting, Carol. Over the last few months, what we've seen is a real switch from individual names. No surprise, right? You guys report about this all the time, that the individual names maybe don't have as much interest from the retail trader as they did, a year and a half ago. What we've seen is a lot of people trading more index-based things, and what I mean by that are ETFs, particularly like SPY, QQQ, et cetera. What has been interesting is this year we started to see the return of the individual name, particularly Tesla, Microsoft, Apple, sort of the names you would expect. And we had that nice run. Over the last 7 trading days going into today, what we had seen is that Microsoft, Apple, those two particular names were down almost 20% in terms of the amount of trading that we had seen. And Tesla had fallen off by almost 30%. After its great rally until last Friday. We're starting to see a big interest again in Tesla. And to me, Tesla, along with Bitcoin, to be quite honest with you, I use as real barometers of retail investor confidence, because those are two stocks that definitely, as people are feeling better, they start to a stock in a digital asset that as people start to feel better, they are buying more of. As people are more unsure, they start to cut their trading in there or even sell them. So I think we're at a really interesting crux right now as we head into February, middle of February, and into the end of this first quarter, as to will this confidence continue. But the fact is, sorry, go ahead.
Go back for a second. So, JJ, what you're saying is that we saw people switch out, right, from individual names and trading index-based. Was that beginning of this year, or are you talking about last year?
No, that was the end of last year, into the beginning of this year. As this year has progressed, let me be more clear in that description. As this year has progressed, we've seen more interest in individual names. As we rallied those first few weeks of the year, a lot of individual names.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tesla, which is one that I look at a lot, is the one that fell off on its trading, particularly over the last 2 weeks, 30% until last Friday. Since last Friday, we've started to see an uptick again. The week's only a few days old here, but Tesla starting to pick up their trading interest again, which is a good sign to me, in that the retail trader is now getting a bit more confidence in the market.
And you see that similarly with Apple, kind of a similar idea.
Apple's usually a bit of a trailer behind Tesla.
Okay.
And but Tesla, it used to be Apple and Microsoft used to be the leaders. That switched, where Tesla is now the leader of retail confidence.
So it doesn't seem to worry you much, Tesla dropping by a ton today. You're still thinking that just the volume there is a good indication?
Yeah, because what you're seeing is people, when things worry me, is when people stop buying on the drop, where they're like, okay, we'll buy some. If we drop, we'll buy more. And I think one of the great lessons that the retail investor has taken from the meme stock craze, et cetera, is to not put all their eggs in one basket, if you will, to start to trade more like a professional, and that is, nibble at different levels, not I have to be 100% there.
Are you starting, we've only got, 12 minutes left in this session. Are you seeing buyers come back into the market for Tesla as we're getting ready to wrap up the day? Any signs of that today?
Yes, we're starting to see this afternoon more people starting to buy Tesla, both stocks and some call options.
And I want to broaden out a little bit, because you're talking a lot about the retail investor, and we're only going to have about 30 seconds with you on this. What do you advise the average retail investor to do with this market? We are in such a weird time. What would your advice be? What should they be looking at?
A little bit of just what I just said, and that is whatever it is you decide to do, you only do a portion of your investment overall. The second thing is you have to be patient, because we have seen this back and forth. No real reason to believe right now, in my opinion, that the S&P 500 breaks out of the 3,700 on the downside, the 4,200 range on the upside, convincingly either way for the next month and a half or so. There just doesn't seem, barring some, random weird event, everything else happening seems to be keeping us in a range.
All right. Interesting. JJ Kinahan, thank you so much. So appreciated. Chief Executive Officer of IG North America, joining us via Zoom from Chicago. And this, as we are seeing stocks pretty much at their highs of the session, just rolling over a little bit, but up about 0.8% on both the S&P and the NASDAQ. And Maddie, this is still as yields, holding on to those for the most part. Yep, 4% levels across the curve.
Crazy. We were with Greedy yesterday when that first hit that 4% mark. Now here we are today.
Yeah, fascinating. All right. Folks, you are listening and watching Bloomberg Business Week.
company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. 7 minutes to go ahead of the close. Citigroup cutting hundreds of jobs across the country, with the Wall Street Giants investment banking division among those affected. Citigroup shares down now by about 0.4%. San Francisco-based Salesforce surging by the most in almost 3 years after giving a surprisingly upbeat forecast for the coming year and announcing plans to step up stock buybacks. Right now, shares of Salesforce, they are up by 11.2%. Macy's shares are soaring after the retailer reported fourth quarter earnings that exceeded expectations. Macy's right now up by 11%. And with more on the Macy's story, here's Bloomberg's Steve Rappaport.
Charlie, that was thanks in part to sales growth at the Bloomingdale's and Bluemercury brands. Gross margin in the fourth quarter was 34.1%, down from 36.5% a year earlier. The company attributed the decline to markdowns and promotions that were larger than in 2021, a reflection of the company's commitment to end 2022 with inventories at the right level and composition. Over the last year, Macy's has been recognized for managing inventory better than some other apparel companies, which overordered and were left with too much merchandise. The company said inventories were down 3% in the fourth quarter from the prior year. Charlie?
And that's Steve Rappaport. Macy's again up by 11%. Best Buy out with earnings, and Best Buy shares are down now by 2.1%. Tesla's much awaited long-awaited Investor Day failed to live up to the hype. We do have Tesla shares trading lower by 5.8%. And those are some of the company stories we're following. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
Yes, indeed, everybody. Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master along with Maddie Mills in for Tim. Bloomberg Business Week brought to you by Innovation Refunds. This is your daily reminder from Innovation Refunds. In just about 8 minutes, you can find out if your business qualifies for Employee Retention Credit Assistance. Innovation Refunds has helped thousands of small to medium-sized businesses claim the ERC, and they may be able to help yours as well. Time is running out, though, to claim the ERC, so be sure to get started today. Learn more. Just head to getrefunds.com.
And we've got more Business Week to come. But Carol,
Sorry, I had a momentary lapse there.
No, what? Never apologize because you are perfect in every single way.
This is why I love her. One of the many reasons.
Silvergate.
We haven't really talked about it.
We haven't really talked about it. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more on our simulcast in a minute here, but this will give me a chance to make sure I say everything perfectly. Silvergate, woes deepening on Thursday because of that contagion from FTX, the bank raising questions about whether it can stay in business, shares plummeting to a record low. That crypto friendliness is just really tough for those folks out there.
And that's the whole idea, right?
Yeah.
We've talked about it. The news continues from the carnage that we saw in the crypto world in 2022. And this is a bank been around for a while, but cutting off ties, the partners to this bank, it has been crypto friendly. So just as a reminder of what's going on there. Hey, having said that, there is a quick story we do want to mention too. It's among the most read on the Bloomberg in the past 60 minutes. You put Janet Yellen and you put the Fed in a headline. She, of course, was the former head of the U.S. Central Bank. Well, she's now, of course, Treasury Secretary. Janet Yellen saying the Fed will have to reduce the heat in the U.S. labor market. She continues, though, to believe that that can be done without adding to unemployment. Hence, the soft landing, I guess, is what she is saying.
Yeah, I love this headline, having to take the heat out of the jobs market because, you know what I mean? Like this is absolutely the thing that we talk about all the time. It's like, how are we going to tackle this inflation if the jobs market just continues to be so tight?
But can the Fed do it? Wouldn't that be incredible if the Fed can raise rates, take some of continue to bring down inflation, but yet it doesn't mean putting a lot of people out of work, which is something we talked about, labor hoarding, people holding on because they're saying tight labor market, I don't want to let workers go because
PTSD from the labor shortage.
Exactly. Right? Good way of saying it. Exactly. All right, folks, a couple of minutes left in the trading session. We're heading over to our TV team because Bloomberg's Beyond the Bell. It starts right now.
Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick alongside Scarlett Fu. We're counting you down to the closing bell, and here to help take us beyond the bell, it's a global simulcast. We're joined by Madison Mills and Carol Master, too. Welcome to our audiences across Bloomberg Television, Radio, Bloomberg Originals, as well as those folks streaming on YouTube. Carol, this has been an interesting day.
Yep.
We talk about a market that looks like it's going to finish in the green across the board. That was not how we started the day.
I am kind of blown away and trying to make sense of it. And I know some of this is certainly some of the analysis is coming out from Fed's Bostic that maybe he said, we're going to maybe not pivot, but maybe we pause, right, towards the end of the summer when
Hope
it comes
springs
to rates.
eternal.
But don't you feel like, come on, folks, they're data dependent. Just wait until the next Fed meeting. I don't know. I am not quite sure I understand any of it.
Well, also the idea that we're going to stop by the end of the summer feels like that was something that should have been predicted a little bit as well, right?
Maybe it's as simple as you had 2 days of losses, you had 3 weeks of losses before that, and it's a little bit of a rebound because dead cats bounce. Did you know that, Romaine?
Yeah, so we talk about, I am curious though here, Carol, Master. I mean, we talk about sort of what's actually leading this market. Yeah. And we talk about it being higher, but look at where we've been over the last few weeks. I mean, this is still a range-bound market. We really haven't gone anywhere different than where we were a few months ago. In fact, we're still pinned below 4,000 in the S&P, and even the other indices are kind of in the same situation.
You watch the technicals, which I love about you. I mean, we haven't taken out the 200-day, have we?
Yeah, I didn't quite hear the end of that because of the clapping and the cheering there, Carol Master. You know that happens every day at this time, don't you?
I do, you know.
But whatever the question you asked, I will get back to it in a second. We're up pretty much across the board here. The Dow Jones Industrial Average looks like it's going to close higher by more than 300 points, up about 1%. The S&P up about roughly 29 points or 30 points, up about 0.8%. The NASDAQ Composite higher by more than 80 points or 0.7%. The Russell 2000 only up about 0.2% on the day. And once again, Carol Master,
yes,
outperformer on the day. Dow Transport's up 1.9%.
All right, I'm looking at the 200-day, right? We kissed it a little while ago.
Yes.
We bounced off of it. So as you say these levels, I keep looking for these new levels, and I think that's some strong support, you know, Scarlett, when it comes to the broader market.
Yeah, strong support. And you see that reflected in the industry groups. 24 industry groups, and guess what? Only 3 of them are in the red. You have utilities, software and services, a lot of those big tech names up there, household and personal products. So you've got consumer staples, you've got tech, you've got utilities. It's a pretty broad mix. And on the downside, autos and components, and that's mainly Tesla after its investor day, and banks and insurers, which have been consistently underperforming today.
That's a market that feels pretty confident right now. But as you said, Scarlett, maybe it's just after a couple of days of losses. It's like, I'm finding some bargains. I'm finding some value there. All right, so let's get to some of the individual gainers in today's session. And Salesforce, we talked about it after the close yesterday. They reported earnings, top in the S&P 500. This stock up just shy of 12% here by the close. We know they've been in the crosshairs of 5 activist investors. They rallied after giving a surprisingly upbeat forecast. They also announced plans to step up their buyback. So really significant outperformance. Macy's, talk about outperformance, 11%. Or Caroline Hyde talking with the company's CEO.
And Caroline too, yeah.
Caroline. All right, God, you're hard on me. Jumping, also talking about profits topping expectations, a strong full-year outlook, 11% to the upside. And Dexcom, I have no idea exactly why this is up, but it's up about 9.5%. Top of the S&P and NASDAQ 100. Remember, this stock took a hit when Apple came out and said it's making progress on a glucose monitor for its watch. This is what Dexcom does. They are talking at a City Health event with the company's investor relations at Dexcom. I was looking for some things that might be a catalyst. They're just giving an update on the business. Anyway, let's keep an eye on this one maybe in the coming days to see if some news comes out.
Well, I've got the decliners for us today. I'm going to kick it off with Tesla here. Valuation erasing $50 billion after that investor day disappointed yesterday. We talked about this, that it was going to be a sell the news event, and that ended up coming true. And it was more about what they didn't say. This is what Ed Ludlow's been saying all day. Not a lot of details on new cars, targeting a 50% cost reduction in cars, but that's about it. They said that they're moving away from rare earth metals and silicon carbide chips. That news hitting miners really hard today. I want to see materials, MP materials down by a little over 10% on the close. And then Silvergate sinking 58% on the close. That is the biggest drop on record. We've been talking about this. Crypto-friendly bank raising concerns about its viability. More fears of contagion here following the collapse of FTX. The bank is really struggling. Crypto-friendly banks still struggling at this time.
Let's get a quick check on the yield space, Carol. You were just talking about those comments out of Raphael Bostic at the Atlanta Fed, which may have been the pivot point for this market to move higher. But we started the day here with the big surge on the longer end of the curve, that 30-year yield getting above 4% for the first time since November. Still up about 5 basis points, still above 4%, as are the other major parts of the yield curve here. The 20-year yield at 4.3, the 10-year yield still at 4.06 here, and that 2-year yield still making a run towards 4.9. We're up about across the board here, and I guess it could have been worse. We get to this idea here, is the market paying more attention to the earnings, more attention to the micro guys, or is it really about what the Fed is going to do, and more importantly, when they actually stop doing it?
A little bit of everything, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is what we see from day to day. I mean, the Fed is data dependent, got that, but I feel like investors are data dependent, whether it's earnings, what the Fed is saying, whether it's economic news, Scarlett. We really trade from one thing to the next.
Right, and since we're at the tail end of earnings season, there are a couple of earnings we're still awaiting right now. People are really going to fixate on any catalyst that they can get their hands on. And for now, it's very much focused on all the macro data. The jobless claims being a perfect example today.
Scarlett, you love Fed speak. Chris Waller, a Fed governor, coming out, prepared remarks that he's set to give here, basically saying that the Fed must remain data dependent, but he also says if the data comes in hot, we need to raise rates even
So what did we learn from that?
But that's data
Was that
dependent.
New? Yeah. I don't know. It depends on what kind of mood the market is in at any given point. That could be read as hawkish or it could be read as dovish.
But it's interesting to think about this in comparison to the comments that we got from Bostic earlier today. I wonder which of these people are going to cling on to a little bit more.
I think the tough thing is, like, listen, inflation is definitely down from where we were a year ago, but we've heard a lot of people talk about it. It's really sticky, obviously, and it's just taking longer for this last portion to come down. And the other thing is, does it ultimately come down to that target of 2%?
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't.
Is that elusive and will be forever stuck in this 3, 4, 5% range?
All right, guys, you want to talk about HPE?
Go ahead. You want to do HPE? Go ahead, Carol Master.
I would love to do it. HP Enterprises, let's get right to the outlook because we care a lot about that. Sees second quarter net revenue $7.1 billion to $7.5 billion. That looks like it is above the forecast of $7.05 billion. If we take a step back at the first quarter, adjusted EPS 63 versus 54, the estimate, that's a beat. First quarter net revenue $7.81 billion, Scarlett. That too is a beat. The street was looking for $7.41 billion, and also making an acquisition. This is a company that has been acquiring companies. That's what it does.
Okay, and we also have earnings coming out of Dell. I was looking at HPE as well, but let's go to Dell first. Dell, of course, the PC maker, reporting fourth quarter adjusted net revenue of $25 billion, better than expected. Analysts were looking for 23.4, and fourth quarter adjusted EPS of $1.80, also higher than what was anticipated, which was $1.64. In addition, there's the returning cash to shareholders. We returned approximately $3.8 billion of capital. We're increasing our dividend, our annual dividend, by 12% as well in fiscal year 2024.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, and I do want to go back to HPE and the purchase of Access Security. They're not saying terms here, but I think the idea that they're pushing further into that cloud space, Access, of course, a cloud security company, but the idea that they're pushing deeper into that space and doing it through acquisitions, I think is kind of interesting to see I guess not necessarily the pivot, but I guess the strategy that Antonio Neri has been taking at that company.
Yeah, exactly. We're getting across the terminal HPE to acquire Access Security and sees that deal closing by the end of the second quarter.
Yeah, I mean, this is a company that is going through a transition and, looking for some of the specific breakouts because this is a company, their intelligent edge revenue. This is something that is part of the company's transformation, and perhaps this acquisition plays into it. So we'll look for some more color about the business and the outlook going forward.
All right, and just go back to VMware here. They're crossing the wire here. Adjusted EPS is coming in slightly higher than what the street was looking for, $2.13 versus street estimate of $1.94. Revenue also up about 5% on the year, coming in just a smidge above the street estimates, $3.71 billion. Street was looking for about $3.63.
Yeah, I'm still looking at Dell here, just looking at the stock jumping in post-trading here, 8% after the quarterly results beat. I'm still trying to get a sense of what the outlook is here, and I'm not seeing it. So this just seems to be a knee-jerk reaction to that better than expected fourth quarter number.
Yeah, and Dell Technologies, again, jumping 8% after that quarterly results beat there, Scarlett. So really interesting to watch that the market is enjoying that a little bit after the close, but I guess we're going to have to see. Their shares are up 0.5% year to date as well.
Yeah, I want some more color on Dell because I thought we were all cutting back.
Right.
We bought all our stuff during the pandemic, right?
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Is it breaking down already?
I don't know. So we'll look for some more information, but it is still up about 6.3% in the after hours. We are seeing HPE going, though, in the other direction, that stock. Actually, now it's up about 2.4%, so kicking around to the upside, at least at this hour. All right, guys, some earnings, wrapping up kind of the tail end, if you will. That's a wrap, though, for our cross-platform coverage, radio, TV, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals. We will see you again, same time, same place, tomorrow.
I snapped you a selfie. I snapped you yesterday. Oh my God, you watched my story, but you won't snap back. Maybe I should snap you some more.
All right, everybody, watching the earnings in the after hours, kicking around. In the meantime, something that we continue to kick around in so many different conversations, because it does feel like it's a big buy-in when it comes to all things generative AI and ChatGPT, because the latest has to do with Snapchat.
It does, and I love this story so much, so I am really glad that we are talking about it. We've got Bloomberg News technology reporter Alex Barinka with us on Zoom from LA. Alex, great to speak with you. We're obsessed with ChatGPT, so it wouldn't be our show if we didn't talk about it. But let's start with Snapchat and ChatGPT. What's going on?
I mean, you're not the only one obsessed with ChatGPT. Snap seems to be too. They're the latest tech company to actually roll out a product for users. And the reason we thought this was really interesting is Snap is also was the first social media company to roll out subscriptions. And they're putting their ChatGPT AI bot, which you can message with, behind that paywall. So if you're a user on Snapchat and you want to ask it for recipes or suggestions of what to do in LA this weekend, or for a suggestion on a birthday gift for a friend, you're going to have to be one of these people who are paying $4.99 a month. So it's an interesting use from this company, the latest to kind of pile in, and kind of the first large tech company to make this actually a paid product, a place of potential revenue for them.
So interesting.
Wait, so they're going to be selling chatbots?
Sort of. Snap has something called Snapchat Plus. So you can use the Snapchat app for free, but if you're a Snapchat Plus subscriber, you get access to early product releases. You can do things like set personalized ringtones for your friends. You can get priority placement in celebrities' inboxes if you message them. And now you get their My AI chatbot. So yes, absolutely, Carol, you will be paying for chatbots on Snapchat.
Alex, can you tell me how successful that side of the business is? Because I know that Snap is for the youngins. Are they paying for this? Like, or I guess their parents are paying for it. I don't know. Is that happening?
Surprisingly, folks are. So they came out at their investor day that I was at here in Santa Monica a few weeks ago saying they have 2.5 million subscribers in just about 8 months that this has been kind of out in the world. Now, let's compare that to some of the other social companies. Twitter rolled out its subscription product. They reportedly have less than 300,000. So that is a lot less. Meta has just rolled out their Meta verified subscription for Facebook and Instagram in the last few weeks. So too soon to tell, but it's really interesting Snap's strategy with this. They are kind of giving users things that they might want, fun things, versus Twitter and Meta have really focused on things like security, verification, frankly, things that those young users might see as a little bit perhaps boring. So they're taking a bit of a different tact here, which is why we wanted to dig into the strategy, because, you know, it's something that they're giving people instead of something that they're kind of taking away.
What I'm really interested in too, though, on this is that you just said it perfectly, Alex, because you cover this and you know it so well. But for Twitter, you want me to start paying to be verified? I've already been verified since I was 18 years old. Like, now I have to do this again? It doesn't make sense to me that they're kind of putting forward this offering as if it's something valuable that I would pay for, when like privacy and getting to stay verified feel like things that I should just get.
It's a totally hard sell, and Meta has something too that feels table stakes for social media in that bucket too. They're offering customer service. Again, things that feel like they kind of should be the baseline. So Snap and its CEO, Evan Spiegel, has always been kind of a very product-focused company. They've always kind of thought about what can we give our users to keep them around. Their app is not just copying. They're actually the app that gets copied oftentimes. You'll remember Stories and even the subscription product itself have been copied by the likes of Meta and YouTube. So it's a really interesting kind of move from them, and one that, you know, if you're a watcher of this space, I wouldn't be surprised if this gets the wheels turning in folks' brain at some of these other companies saying, hey, is this something that is so big that people want so bad that we should consider asking people to pay for it too?
All right, so help me out. You're sitting down with your Aunt Edna, and she says, hey, Alex, I love you. You're such a great niece. What the heck is this chatbot stuff all about? And what is generative AI? Like, how do we have to think about, we had a great conversation with Ori Levine, co-founder of Waze. Like, how do we need to think about how generative AI is not new, it's been around for a long time, but generative AI, how it really impacts our world at large?
Yeah, and I'll take kind of the real human approach, right? How is that actually going to impact your life? In the back end, it's ingesting so much information, text, photos, videos, basically so that you can ask it questions, so that it can create things for you in a way that feels very human. Snap, to use their example, it's actually kind of like a persona that you can talk to on the app and kind of have a conversation with and engage with. It's something that's meant to kind of augment your reality. So you see it in the text form with Snap. Snap. A thing that Meta has talked about that they're looking into uses for generative AI is on things like filters and kind of bringing things in that are computer generated into photos and videos. So when ChatGPT rolled out, when OpenAI rolled out, they did it in a way that I thought was really interesting. They launched something that like normal people could use, right? A lot of times in the tech world, you hear these big acronyms, large language learning models, things that don't really mean anything to us. But ChatGPT, which is the OpenAI product that Snap is actually working with, they rolled out this thing that like we all could kind of play with and look and feel and kind of unlock our imagination of what could happen there. So that is kind of the immediate human impact, and it's really kind of, you know, gotten folks thinking about what this could do in the future.
When it comes to the chat bot on Snap, when does this become a bot that can like have a conversation for me? Not just on Snap, but I'm also, I mean, I'm looking at the dating app space, Alex, and I'm wondering when that's going to happen.
Terrifying.
And it's terrifying. Is that a thing?
It could potentially be a thing, and that could be a very good use. You know, I spent a lot of time thinking about Gen Z on Snap and TikTok and kind of how that generation thinks. And the joke is, you know, they're big activists online, but they're afraid to call the pizza man to order a pie. So you could think about kind of the different opportunities that you could tap something that feels and sounds human, that can really quickly answer or, you know, do everything from, you know, pick the best veggies on a pizza to give you a recipe to cook yourself or write a poem to send to your love on a dating app. But I think all of those things are kind of in the consciousness right now that folks are talking about. But also, you know, there's cautions abound as to the implications as well.
Thank you so much. You made the segue. So Apple has delayed the approval of an email app update with AI-powered language tools over concerns that it could generate inappropriate content for children. This is according to communications Apple sent to the app maker. This is, I am reading from a story from the Wall Street Journal, Dow Jones. So as much as it's like, you know, generative AI takes 2 or 3 steps forward, it feels like all of a sudden we take a couple steps back. We've seen Wall Street pushing back as well. So walk us through this and the concerns that are out there.
Totally. A greenfield means it's also probably been not fully explored. We've already seen some issues with the chatbots putting out misinformation or just inappropriate content, whether that's, you know, curse words to really kind of inflammatory phrasing. And this app in particular is made by Blix. It's the Blue Mail app. Apple has basically said, hey, look, this update that you have where you're going to roll out this chatbot AI, generative AI technology, it could kind of insert some kind of harmful or inappropriate behavior for the age setting that you have on your app. Blue Mail app is set for ages 4 and up. So Apple's basically pushing back and saying, hey, if you want to include this without having some filters in place, then you need to raise the age limit for your app. The company is pushing back on this, saying it's not fair. It's not quite a kind of a flat distribution of these rules. But look, Apple's always been known as having kind of a gatekeeper for their app store and making sure that it hits that all the apps hit certain guidelines. But it does tell me that Apple is of course looking very closely at the integration of this new technology and making sure that the apps that it carries on its phones and computers also clear the bar of their kind of guidelines there.
All right, kiddo, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much, Alex. Always appreciate you spending some time with us. Alex Barinka, tech reporter at Bloomberg News via Zoom from our LA bureau. Just want to mention Nordstrom out with their latest earnings. Stock down about 0.8%. Companies fourth quarter adjusted EPS and revenue. Looks like EPS in line, revenue a little light. And talking about the outlook, which has quite a range out there. So investors trying to make sense of it. And right now, as we said, stock down about 0.7%. You're listening and watching Bloomberg Radio.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 4:21 on Wall Street. I'm Charlie Pellet. We check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Earnings fast and furious, and we have got you covered. We begin with Costco reporting moments ago. Costco reporting earnings per share for the second quarter that beat the average analyst estimate, but after ours, we're keeping an eye on Costco, down now by 1.8%. Broadcom, one of the world's biggest chip makers, gave a strong revenue forecast for the current quarter, indicating that companies are still spending on corporate networking infrastructure. After ours, Broadcom, ticker AVGO, it is up by about 1%. Dell reporting better than expected revenue and profit, easing fears of weakening demand for office infrastructure. After ours, Dell up now by 6%. Hewlett-Packard Enterprise delivered a strong forecast for the current quarter. It also boosted its annual outlook. HPE up now by 5%. Back to retail, we heard from Nordstrom. It reported adjusted EPS for the fourth quarter that matched the average analyst estimate. And after ours, Nordstrom down 2.3%. Stocks managed to snap 2 days of losses after Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta President Raphael Bostic said the central bank could be in a position to pause rate hikes sometime this summer. Stocks closed close to session highs, just off, in fact, with the S&P up 30 points, up by about 0.8%. The Dow up 341, up 1%. NASDAQ up 83. That was a gain of 0.7%. 10-year yield 4.06%. The 2-year 4.88%. Spot gold little changed on the day at $18.36. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.3%, $77.95 a barrel. So again, repeating and recapping here, the 10-year 4.06%. Stocks rally on Bostic with the S&P up by 0.8%. And that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Carol Master along with Maddie Mills right here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Bloomberg Business Week brought to you by Innovation Refunds. This is your daily reminder from Innovation Refunds. There is still time to claim the Employee Retention Credit. Unlike the PPP, the ERC is not alone. Business owners can use the ERC to expand their company, pay off debts, or hire new talent. The money there to help your business as you see fit. To learn more, just head to getrefunds.com. All right, we do want to talk about a couple of earnings reports. Both HPE and Dell out with their latest earnings. Dell is up more than 6.5% in the aftermarket. And if I do a quick check on HPE, it is trading because it was down, and now it's up about 5.3%. So perfect voice to talk about it. Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Technology Analyst Woo Jin Ho. He's joining us back in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. So let's start with Dell. Okay, it is up about 6.7%. Got a bunch of headlines. What stands out? Because this is a great proxy, right, for IT spending and PCs and all that good stuff.
Well, I will tell you. Just keep in mind we had HP Inc.
Right.
Who reported a couple of days back, and they actually reported a dire PC outlook. And if I look at some of the print. Dell actually printed commercial PC sales better than expectations. Now it's down. On a year-on-year basis, but they beat consensus expectation by about 10%. So commercial PCs is actually standing out a little bit better than we thought. But keep in mind that Dell has a fair amount of infrastructure, corporate infrastructure spending, servers and storage, and that's where the bulk of the beat was in the quarter.
And you made this great point that the company cutting back on jobs might be a bad sign, that computer demand is not recovering as quickly as Dell might need it. Do you read that differently after these earnings?
I don't, right? Because I think profitability is king, cash flow is king right now. And if I saw the headlines go through, Dell increased their dividends by 12%. So that is confidence in the cash flow generation going into the next year.
They wouldn't have done it if they didn't feel confident.
I agree.
Right?
Agreed.
No, so keep going.
Right.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
So yeah. Well, look, I think it's a cash flow preservation.
Yeah.
And headcount reductions do help.
Interesting. And let's just a little housekeeping on the C-suite. They did announce that the CFO, Tom Sweet, is going to retire at the end of the second fiscal quarter. It's going to be replaced by Senior VP Yvonne McGill, who is currently corporate controller. I mean, we were just looking. Sweet's been there almost 10 years.
Right.
Through a lot.
Right.
At Dell.
I don't think he wants to go through another round of transition.
Okay, so that seems fair. All right, so is there a takeaway, a thought about the outlook, or what is it that you want to hear on the call from Dell in particular?
Let's listen to what they talk about on two aspects. The PC outlook, right? HP Inc. Guided to down 15% units on a year-on-year basis for 2023. That's a little bit weaker than I thought.
Is that not just kind of a readjustment, recalibration post-pandemic? That's something else?
It is a readjustment, but I think the consensus view was about 10 to 12% down. HP is saying 15% down. I wouldn't be surprised if Dell would say something along those lines as well, right? But what's in Dell's favor is that they have a higher corporate PC mix than consumer PC mix. So if corporate PCs hold up, Dell could actually win back or gain share and outperform the PC market versus its peers.
Does that seem likely to you, and what do you look at to determine that? Because I get from the total non-analyst perspective over here, I think about how people aren't returning to the office as quickly, and if they have a work laptop that they use at home, they already have it. So what do you look at to determine whether that corporate demand is going to keep Dell up?
Well, I think there are some concerns about headcount cuts, corporate headcount cuts overall, right? But keep in mind that we're still talking about a down number on a year-on-year basis from a unit basis, right? It's still going to be down 10% off of a weak number. The one thing I will say is that the new number is going to be back at pre-pandemic levels. So the one. I've been saying this for quite some time now, and a broken clock is right twice. But I think we're finally at a bottom of the PC market.
Okay. Well, and that would be good, right? Like we just kind of finally get to
now is a time where
some clarity.
After we can get over the second quarter hump.
Yeah.
Now the companies can start getting constructive into 2024.
All right, so let's talk about HPE. We've talked about Dell, which is rallying in the aftermarket. So too is HPE. It's now up about 5% here. The second quarter net revenue outlook, 7.1 to 7.5 billion. The estimate was 7.05 billion. Is that the big key takeaway for this company in terms of outlook?
Quite frankly, I think it's the fiscal 23 outlook.
Okay.
Right? They raised the guidance from 2 to 4 to closer to 5 to 7% growth. I'm sure the first quarter has
a big difference.
That's a 2% delta from where consensus was, right? And what it tells me is that they have confidence in the sustainability of demand. This is much similar to what I saw in Cisco a couple of years back. And what HPE does, HPE Enterprise they have a mountain of backlog that the enterprise customers are still working through, right?
The backlog because of supply chain problems earlier?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So there's HPE is able to sell that backlog and convert that into sales. Keep in mind, I have a couple of colleagues tell me orders can always be canceled. And by raising the guidance, it means that the orders aren't being canceled.
That is really interesting.
That they have confidence that they're going to go through.
That's a good perspective. Access security, how big of a deal is that for HPE?
I think it's par for the course in terms of the type of deals that they've made. It's the second deal that they've announced over the past couple of days. One was on the private wireless side a couple of days ago. Access security, that only further enhances what they want to do on the enterprise networking side. So anything that helps them build their subscription revenues is a good thing for HPE over the long term.
So they've been going through a transformation, right? And kind of riding the ship, if you will. Where are they in that process based on what we're seeing?
It's actually going well. I mean, if you look at the Green Lake number, right, $1 billion in ARR that they announced, it's still a small number relative to the overall business, but that business is actually building up, right? So I do expect the CEO to really talk that up on the quarter. Right, but they are trying to change the way how people consume and buy enterprise equipment on a subscription basis.
Who's their biggest competitor?
HPE. It's probably Dell and IBM.
Okay,
and they're all doing well though right now, right?
Well, NetApp reported just the other day they cut their outlook. Right, but one of the things that I do want to draw out, it's like the back to basics, right?
Yeah.
Those type of businesses are actually been holding up, even in an IT spending belt tightening, right? The fancy, the next generation cloud stuff, right? The super duper digital transformation stuff, that's being pulled back. So what's telling me is that the high growth science project stuff is not being invested in right now.
I have a million questions I want to ask you. It's funny because we talked with a member of the executive committee at SAP and just said when it comes to IT spending, you've got like their customers, their CFOs and their finance team are in it and being like, okay, if we spend on this, what's the value? Like they're being very smart in their decision making. We are going to be talking with the CEO of HPE tomorrow. What would be top of mind for you?
It's got to be the guidance and what's holding up that guidance.
What's supporting it?
What is supporting it?
And what do you expect to hear, or what would disappoint you in an answer?
Well, Antonio's going to always be positive, especially given where the print is.
Yeah.
What you're going to hear on the call today is the new order flow, right? And is he able to rebuild some of those orders? Orders are going to be down.
Yeah.
And he just has to talk around orders, and the growth is not entirely from the backlog itself.
But I like what you had to that the growth isn't all about backlog. Right. But what you said, like they're not going to put out a forecast unless they feel pretty confident about it, right? Because you know in this market environment you'll just get beat up.
Yeah. Exactly.
Really good. It's really cool that we get to talk to people like you for our jobs because you know this inside and out. It's really cool.
I read somewhere where you're not supposed to call people like rock stars. But I don't know. It was some analysis like stop doing it, people.
Why not?
Oh, whoa, the commercial at the Super Bowl, right? Stop using rock star. You are a rock star.
Come on.
Woo Jin Ho, senior tech analyst here at Bloomberg Intelligence, here in our interactive broker studio.
Let's get a check on the latest world and national news with Nancy Lyons in the Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in D.C. Hey, Nance.
Thanks, Madison. The Justice Department says Donald Trump is not entitled to absolute immunity against civil lawsuits seeking to hold him liable for the attack on the U.S. Capitol January 6th. In a newly filed court brief, government attorneys say he does not deserve immunity because he's accused of inciting, quote, imminent private violence. Trump's immunity defense has been rejected by a federal judge, and his attorneys are urging an appeals court to reverse the ruling. The House Ethics Committee says it has unanimously voted to investigate New York Republican George Santos. The panel will have jurisdiction to determine whether Santos has engaged in unlawful activity with respect to his 2022 congressional campaign. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo says she is working with members of Congress to keep data gathered by Chinese social media apps from threatening national security. Speaking at Bloomberg's Washington offices, Raimondo says the issue goes beyond TikTok.
I know many members of the Senate, Senator Warner, Senator Rubio, there's a number of members in the U.S. Senate who are thinking hard about what's the right way to protect American national security, American privacy, American data.
Secretary Raimondo says she is considering a trip to China as soon as this spring. The bottom line on the world's expanding waistline is soaring.
A new report called the World Obesity Atlas 2023 finds the economic impact of treating overweight people and the drag on productivity will jump to nearly $4.3 trillion by 2035. That's more than double from 2020, and it's close to 3% of the world's GDP. The report says almost a quarter of people over the age of 5 will be obese by 2035. It says it could take more than better diets and exercise to tackle the issue. In Washington, I'm Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day. I'm Nancy Lyons.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 4:41 on Wall Street. We check the markets all day long at Bloomberg. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all rallied today, but after the bell, lots of earnings. We begin with Costco. It reported EPS for the second quarter that beat the average analyst estimate. Costco shares, however, after hours, they are trading lower right now. We do have shares of Costco down by about 2.1%. Dell reported better than expected revenue and profit, easing fears of weakening demand for office infrastructure. Here's Bloomberg Intelligence senior tech analyst Woo Jin Ho, who was interviewed moments ago right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
What's in Dell's favor is that they have a higher corporate PC mix than consumer PC mix. So if corporate PCs hold up, Dell could actually win back or gain share and outperform the PC market versus its peers.
And again, Dell after hours up now by 6.2%. Broadcom, one of the world's biggest chip makers, gave a strong revenue forecast for the current quarter, indicating that companies are still spending on corporate networking infrastructure. After hours, we've got Broadcom up now by about 1%. S&P up the most in more than 2 weeks. Stock snapped 2 days of losses after Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta President Raphael Bostic said the central bank could be in a position to pause rate hikes sometime this summer. J.J. Kinahan is the CEO of IG North America.
I don't think that in general, Chairman Powell has actually wavered much from the fact that he's going to keep raising rates until he feels that we're in a good place.
Kinahan was interviewed right here on Bloomberg Business Week. S&P today up 30, up 0.8. The Dow up 341, up 1%. NASDAQ up 83, up 0.7. 10-year yield 4.06%, with the 2-year 4.88%. Spot gold 18.36 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.3%, 77.90 a barrel. 10-year worth repeating 4.06%. S&P today up 0.8. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Carol Master along with Maddie Mills live in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio, streaming on Bloomberg Originals and, of course, on YouTube. Hey, we just did a great segment with our own Woo Jin Ho of Bloomberg Intelligence, just talking about the Dell earnings that came out. He talked about the increase in the dividend, which he thought was pretty substantial. And so we do see Dell, as Charlie was talking about as well, we do see Dell continuing to trade up about 4.5% in the after hours. Hewlett-Packard, staying with the tech sector for a moment, with an upbeat forecast for the second quarter, $7.1 billion to $7.5 billion. Estimate on the street is $7.05 billion, as Woo Jin Ho said to us. You know, you're not going to do that unless you feel upbeat about what's to come and working through some of that backlog. So we see HPE continuing to trade up just about 4% here.
Yeah, and I want to dig into some of the fun consumer earnings that we got after the close here. We've got Victoria's Secret reporting adjusted earnings per share for the fourth quarter that beat the average analyst estimate. Adjusted EPS $2.47. The estimate was $2.33. Stores and comp sales down by about 6%, though. Net sales $2.02 billion, and that met the estimate exactly. So let me just see what the stock is doing in the after-hour trade here. Okay, while that is loading. Okay, yeah, so Victoria's Secret down by 2.6% in the close, so that might be because those they basically just met the expectation. They didn't fully exceed it in any way. And then we've got Nordstrom shares
just down a little bit.
Down.
Yeah,
They're down. They are down.
Just a little bit.
After they did boost their earnings outlook, they were up a little bit earlier today. Brighter earnings forecast for the current fiscal year, saying in a statement it's expecting adjusted earnings this fiscal year of $1.80 to $2.20 per share, and that is up from its previous range as well.
Yeah, some good check on the retail sector, if you will. So something we'll follow into the Friday trade. All right, folks, you know it's Women's History Month. A story in the current issue of Bloomberg Business Week talks about how female execs are exhausted, frustrated, and calling it quits. So I'm hoping to get some thoughts on that from our next guest. Keep in mind, too, we're going to get some thoughts on next week's 3rd Annual International Women's Day Benefit Concert. So back with us is Girls with Impact founder and CEO Jennifer Openshaw. She is, of course, also known for starting Women's Financial Financial Network, the first online financial firm created for women. She joins us via Zoom from Greenwich, Connecticut. Jennifer, good to have you here with us. How are you, and what's top of mind for you as we are kicking off Women's History Month?
Well, it's great to be here. And, Women's History Month is a day that so many companies celebrate. But, we didn't feel like there was any go-to place in the evening. And so that's what we've got planned. We've got some amazing performers coming together. And I think it's really an interesting time because, over 1 million women dropped out of the workforce as a result of COVID, right? So here's an opportunity to engage women and to celebrate all the great accomplishments that they've had.
Yeah, that's absolutely critical. I think we talk a lot about some of the downers of news when it comes to women. We had this great story that Carol was talking about in Business Week about how female executives are exhausted, frustrated, and leaving the workforce because the situation is so bad. But to your point, it's critical to also talk about some of the good things, right?
You bet. What we're seeing, we train young women to be leaders of tomorrow, and they're creating business ventures as young as 15, 16, 17, getting a huge leg up. And when you look at some of the founders of companies like Nextdoor, 23andMe, and Madison and Reed, all started by women, there's enormous untapped potential, and it's in our best interest to train them early and fund those companies. $150 billion in venture funding gets doled out. Last year, 2% only went to women, less than 0.5% to women of color. So we are proof, Girls with Impact, that if we train them earlier, they're just much more ready for leadership roles as entrepreneurs or CEOs.
Hey, Jennifer, I hear you. And, what's interesting is, all the research that's out there, and they talk about, women and men, they come out of college and then they kind of start at the same level and they're doing okay. And there's about the same amount of women and men who are at that entry level. But as you go up the ladder, it changes dramatically. And women are easily outnumbered by men, certainly in the senior levels and the C-suite. So I get what you're saying, but it does sound like we need corporate cultures. We certainly had a guest yesterday talking about this, that there's got to be something internally coming in with missions inside companies that say, we want more leaders at the senior level, and we're going to figure out how to do it and stop talking about it, but just do it.
Well, the culture is absolutely key. I started this organization when I was at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Part of the reason because we were releasing data showing exactly what you just talked about. And corporate leaders have to pay attention to corporate culture because the next generation, the young people that we're training, they are looking very closely before they say yes to a job. Is it a purposeful culture? Do they value diversity? Do they respect people for who I am? We all know it's a very different situation and priority with this next generation. So, we'd love all companies to be partnering with us to allow us to help them, become an employer of choice for the next generation. And the other thing is there's things like, there's been so much talk about equal pay, but pay transparency or, doing things like, if you're giving out bonuses, really looking at the data and the trends to say, is it 90% of men who are getting most of those bonuses or increase in bonuses over last year? It really starts at the top, and there's no reason that, some of this can't be changed.
I think we have about 30 seconds left with you, Jennifer. Do you mind just giving us a really quick recap of the event that you've got going on and what people need to know about it?
You bet. This Wednesday, International Women's Day, we've got a fantastic concert happening at 7 o'clock. Right at the Town Hall Theater. We have Motown legend Valerie Simpson of Ashford and Simpson, creator of all those big hits from Diana Ross, Ain't No Mountain High Enough. She's going to be playing them. We've also got a couple incredible performers for young people, so there's something for everybody. I think it's a fantastic night to, celebrate a woman in your life and say thank you. Your mom, your daughters, a colleague at work. You can buy tickets at Ticketmaster. Easier if you go to girlswithimpact.org and look at the top of the link. And we hope to see you there.
All right, great to check in with you. Jennifer, thank you so much. Jennifer Openshaw, CEO of Girls with Impact, joining us via Zoom from Greenwich, Connecticut. Yeah, something to think about with Women's History Month, right?
I love it. And we're going to get a little bit more on Women's History Month in our next conversation with Lisa Mateo's new installment. But yeah, really critical stuff.
All right, folks, you are listening and watching Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar along with Maddie Mills.
Thank you, Carol Massar. I loved that.
Your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We do have Macy's shares surging after today with a gain of 11%. This after Macy's reported fourth quarter earnings that did exceed expectations. Also reporting earnings today, Best Buy predicted sales that it said will fall for a second straight year. Let's get more on the Best Buy report today from Bloomberg's Steve Rappaport.
Charlie, Best Buy said revenue will slip to between $43.8 billion and $45.2 billion in the current fiscal year Thursday. Even at the high end, that would trail the $45.7 billion average of analyst estimates compiled by Bloomberg and the $46.3 billion the company generated last year. The forecast signals another rocky year for Best Buy, as high inflation forces shoppers to spend more on basic goods and think twice before buying televisions, computers, and appliances. The company's revenue declined in 2022 as the sales surge that began early in the pandemic fizzled out. Charlie?
And that's Bloomberg's Steve Rappaport. Lots of earnings after the close of trading. Broadcom, one of the world's biggest chip makers, delivered a strong revenue forecast for the current quarter, indicating the companies are still spending on corporate networking infrastructure. HPE, that's Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, it gave a strong forecast for the current quarter. It also boosted its annual outlook, suggesting that corporations are still upgrading their technology infrastructure in an uncertain economy. After hours, HPE moving higher by about 4.8%. And those are some of the company stories that we are following for you this hour. I'm Charlie Pellett. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, we got more Business Week to come. I'm Madison Mills here with Carol Masser. But first, let's get a check on the latest world and national news with Nancy Lyons in the Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in D.C. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Madison. Well, Ukraine continues to dominate conversations among world leaders. Today, the economic impact of the invasion was the topic for foreign ministers of the group of 20 nations in India. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman is following developments from Washington.
Lincoln raised the threat of sanctions against China should it send weapons to Russia.
That would certainly be one of the things that we and others would look at. And I say others because this concern that China is considering providing lethal military assistance to Russia, this is a shared concern. And many other partners have raised this. It's my understanding have raised it directly with China, including here today in Delhi.
At a brief meeting with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, Blinken urged him to engage in meaningful diplomacy that would bring a durable peace to Ukraine. And he accused the Russians of slow-walking food exports from Ukraine. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
The jury is now deliberating over whether South Carolina attorney Alec Murdaugh murdered his wife and son. Judge Clifton Newman instructed the jury on the true meaning of reasonable doubt.
In criminal cases, the law does not require proof that overcomes every possible doubt. If based on your consideration of the evidence, you are firmly convinced that the defendant is guilty of a crime charged, you must then find him guilty.
One piece of evidence in the trial has been a video that was shot on his son's cell phone, putting Alec Murdaugh at the scene of the crime just minutes before the murders. It was a revelation that proved he had lied to authorities about being there. A fresh 4-person crew is heading to the International Space Station after SpaceX and NASA completed the launch earlier today. The crew includes 2 Americans, a Russian, and an astronaut from the United Arab Emirates. They'll arrive at the space station tomorrow and stay there for 6 months. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons. Back to you, Madison and Carol.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much. Bloomberg Business Week brought to you by Innovation Refunds. This is your daily reminder from Innovation Refunds. Your small to medium-sized business could qualify for up to $26,000 per employee if you kept them on payroll during the pandemic. It is simple and easy to see if you qualify. To learn more, just go to getrefunds.com.
I love it. All right, as you know, Carol, we've been discussing March is Women's History Month. Every day this month, we are celebrating significant moments in women's history. So with your installment for Thursday, March 2nd, here is Bloomberg's Lisa Mateo.
On this day in women's history in 1903, the Martha Washington Hotel opens in New York City, making it the first hotel in the area exclusively for women. The 12-story building along East 29th Street became a hassle-free haven for women who were flocking to the city to fill jobs in business and the arts that were once dedicated to men, and as universities started accepting more female students. Overnight and long-term guests paid $1.50 a day for a small room with shared bathrooms on each floor. The Martha Washington remained a woman's hotel until 1998. In 2012, it was designated a historical landmark and later inducted into the